Hi guys, this is Brother Benny at Liberty. Hey, just want to check in with you today and bring you your Wednesday devotion. I want to bring a thought to you today that maybe you not thought about. I know that you know what this is about. We're all being encouraged to wear masks to keep from the COVID-19 from spreading. But I come to want you to think about today something that there is something spreading much faster and it's much more destructive in our country right now, more than even COVID-19. I hope I've got your attention. There was a man one time that was filling his car with gasoline at a service station. He'd been traveling for a while, so he was hungry and wanted to get something to eat. While he was putting gas in his car, he noticed a little restaurant right next to the gas station named Eddie's. After filling his car with gas, he pulled his car over to the front of the restaurant, went in, and wanted to get something to eat. Before he sat down and ordered a meal, he went to the restroom to wash his hands. And while he was using the facility, he noticed someone had deliberately wrote a message on the wall for every would-be passerby to read. The sign simply said this: "Eat at Eddie's. 50,000 flies can't be wrong." That man had written on that wall his personal opinion. That's all it was. It was his personal opinion about that restaurant. I want to suggest to all of us today that the thing that is spreading faster than now to me in our country, more than COVID-19, is a great deal of personal opinion. The Bible tells us and gives us great instruction about our speech and our words. And I want to read from James chapter 3. It says, "Even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the whole course of nature, and it is set on fire," listen to this, "by hell." I can remember when I was a kid growing up out in the country, my dad and mom used to burn our trash in a 55-gallon barrel. They always warned us kids, "You kids, get out there, don't get out there and play around with that fire." But we were kids. Did we listen? No, we didn't. We would put sticks in the fire, burn paper in the fire, play in the fire, essentially doing what they told us not to do. One hot August day, we accidentally caught our pasture on fire. I mean, fire was going everywhere. It burnt all the way up to a train track, and a great big trestle was on fire. My dad said, "Come on, let's go try to fight this fire." And I was inexperienced at that, and I noticed something. That I had an old tow sack, a feed sack, and we would dip it in water, and I would take it and try to fight the fire by knocking the fire out on the ground with that tow sack. Inadvertently, what I began to notice was that the more I swung at that fire, it would pop a piece of amber over somewhere else, and another fire would start. It's like the worse I fought that fire, the worse it got. I want to suggest today that we as believers, especially as Christians, need to be very wise in how we handle matters in our culture today. And this whole thing of opinions is flying faster and faster in our country. And the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, it says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. And the truth is, in my life and your life, we're either speaking death into our country or we're speaking life into it. I want to make sure that I'm speaking life into the great country that I love. You know, when the whole thing of COVID-19 came out, many talked about wearing these masks, and the real intent was not to keep you from getting it. It was to keep you from spreading it. And I want to suggest today, there are some masks that we as Christians need to put on today to keep just personal opinions from flying out of control, especially destructive personal opinions. I'm reading a book that is called, or a message that is called, "When Opinions Differ, Is Right Ever Wrong?" See, sometimes right is wrong. Even though we're right in our message and our theology, we may be wrong in our heart attitude. And I want to challenge us about that today. Here are some masks we need to put on as we use our free speech. Number one, we can't control how the world is going to talk, but we must be responsible to the Lord about how we communicate and use our words. Colossians chapter 4, verse 6 says, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." The first message I want to suggest is use your free speech, but make sure that it's always motivated by righteousness. The Bible says that righteousness is what will exalt a nation. We need to not be afraid to stand up for what is right and speak the truth on matters that are clearly presented in God's holy word. Our responsibility is to make sure that we look at those matters and know what is clearly something worth fighting for and standing up in truth versus what is just our personal opinion. When I look at the scriptures, it reminds me of the time that the disciples were challenged and they got in trouble just for speaking about Jesus and his resurrection, and authorities came against him and told them that they needed to be quiet. I think it was John that said, we cannot help but speak the things that we have seen and heard. They were standing up for something that was foundational, the freedom to speak about Jesus Christ. That wasn't about their personal opinion. We have to make sure that our free speech is motivated by righteousness, first of all. Another mask that we need to put on to keep from just personal opinion and negativity spreading is this one. Use your free speech, but make sure it's also motivated by love. The Bible tells us in the book of Ephesians that that's exactly what we need to do. We need to make sure that we speak the truth, but we speak it in love. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, is if we go around speaking a lot of words and opinions, but it's not motivated by love, then we're like a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. And we're probably not going to be heard or really taken seriously if it's not motivated by love. Here's a third mask we need to put on. Yes, use our free speech, but make sure that it's motivated by respect. Recognize that these are difficult matters that leaders are having to handle today. And we need to also recognize that opinions abound, especially on emotionally charged issues like we're living with today. Many people want to sit back and criticize government or governors or presidents or any kind of healthcare professionals. And I understand that tendency, and I know they're not getting it all right. But the point being is simply this. It's very, very easy to play armchair quarterback when you're not the one sitting in that position of making decision. It's very easy to criticize. We ought to share our legitimate concerns, but we also need not expect perfection. Any leader, no leader is perfect. And we need to recognize this as well. Not everybody thinks like you do and like I do. And so we need to make sure that our free speech is motivated by respect. Lastly, I want to suggest that our free speech needs to make sure that it's motivated by wisdom. Just because I have an opinion doesn't mean I have to express that opinion. Sometimes wisdom tells us from words found also in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19, "Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." Then it even tells us why. It says, because the righteous or the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. We can just verbalize opinion, but if it's not motivated with truth, wisdom, and love, and wisdom, it may not be effective and likely will not be effective. And it may produce the very thing that we're not wanting. We need wisdom to know when to speak boldly things that are foundational cardinal truths. And at the same time, we need wisdom to know when to hold our peace over trivial matters. Things such as things done differently than the way you might do it if you were a leader. Is every politician motivated in doing the right thing? Obviously not. Are sometimes they motivated by their own political agenda? Absolutely. But wisdom understands this from a believer's perspective, that God is still on the throne. A Republican or a Democrat may think that they're in charge, but we know different. Ultimately, God is in charge. We are still instructed by God to pray for these men, even when they're not necessarily motivated correctly or have their personal political agendas. I want to close by just making a couple of pastoral suggestions to you and I when it comes to our opinions. When our speech is motivated by righteousness, love, respect, and wisdom, If our speech is to be seasoned with grace so as to have the maximum impact and effect, let me suggest a couple of things about the use of our words. Number one, ask yourself as a Christian, do you spend as much time praying for your leaders as you do criticizing them? I know what you know. Criticizing is the easiest thing in the world to do, and praying, well, that's another matter. It's a lot harder to sincerely do that. If not, then perhaps we should take a serious look at our own heart and our motivation. Jesus said we all speak out of the heart. We live out of the heart. And perhaps we have some tucked away, small hidden agenda that's driving our opinions, much of like what we accuse politicians of. Maybe we need to look in the mirror, is kind of the idea. The second thing is, if you must share a complaint, spend as much time affirming our leaders, recognizing that they sit in a place of decision over very difficult matters. I suggest for every concern or complaint you voice, that you match that with the same amount of quality and quantity and content. Just as much as you want to share a concern, spend as much time affirming them. How can we do that? We can match our message of concern also with matters such as being grateful that those people were even willing to become a politician or a leader. Everybody knows it's a very thankless job. We can affirm them for their willingness to serve our country and their love for our country. Even though we may disagree with them, we can still affirm the fact that they were willing to serve and that they're willing to serve this country as a leader. Also, I want to recognize that no one likes criticism. No one wants to be criticized, and yet it's the easiest thing to do. I also recognize the truth and the reality that you do, that for every time we express a personal opinion, believe me, there's always people that want to jump on the bandwagon with that. How do they say it? Misery loves company. So we have to be wise in this matter. It's just plain wisdom in relating when we take an approach that we spend as much time building up as we do tearing down. Our message for every concern and complaint, if we spend as much time and content in that same message via phone call or Facebook or whatever, if we spent balanced time both building up and affirming at the same time as sharing our complaint, I think we'll be much more effective and wise, and will have the greatest impact. Otherwise, it just sounds like we're just venting our frustration, which is not intended to build up. Not only that, if you take this approach, you're setting an example that you're bold enough to speak out, and yet you're encouraging enough to build up. Sometimes it's not what we say, the negative, it's what we're not saying. We're not putting any positive out there. We're not affirming at the same time. Otherwise, again, it just sounds like we are venting our frustration rather than being proactive with the intent to edify. And God said our words should always be done to build up and edify. There was a cartoon one time that shot a picture and told the story of a little girl who was talking to a boy and says, "Do you know that kid who sits behind me in school? I convinced him that my religion is better than his religion." The little boy asked her, "Well, how did you do that?" She said, "Well, it was pretty simple. I just hit him over the head with my lunchbox." The reality is we can't be effective at hitting people over the head with our own opinions. Jesus didn't change people by doing that. Neither will we. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it may be good for us to think why we're saying what we're saying and evaluate our own heart before we speak. And if our speech is not motivated by righteousness, love, respect, and grace and wisdom, maybe we should take this mask off and put this one on.